What's up guys, Elliot here with my reaction to the Canadian Grand Prix. And wow, what an interesting race and weekend we had. There are lots of storylines to unpack, so let's get into it. So before qualifying, we found out that Yuki Tsunoda and Charles Leclerc would be starting from the back of the grid after incurring engine penalties. So we had a bit of rain just before the start of qualifying, which made it a chaotic session. I love it when it rains, it's a bit of a leveler and you end up with a mixed up grid. So straight into Q2, Albon crashes, but he gets away with it, managing to escape out the barrier and carry on. But Perez unfortunately doesn't, also crashing in P2, and that brings out the red flag. And unfortunately that's the end of the session for Perez. Alonso is looking strong in Q1 and strong in Q2, so an interesting storyline to see whether he would be able to get right up there, maybe even challenge for pole. Russell gambled on the slicks in Q3. He set a banker lap on the intermediates, but went for the aggressive strategy, the only person to go onto the slicks. Unfortunately not working out for him. As soon as he goes into the first and second corner, he goes off in turn 2. That's not quite it for him. He does manage to get out of the grass. He does slightly tap the barrier with the rear of his car, but unfortunately that gamble doesn't pay off for him. But I really like this strategy from Russell and from Mercedes. Russell was the one that made the call to go onto slicks, and Mercedes said, yep, sure, go for it. And it feels quite un-Mercedes-like. They're normally very conservative on tyre strategies in races or in qualifying. You know, try and maximise their result as best they can, but they went for it and it didn't pay off in this case. George getting P8 in qualifying, which isn't a massive disaster for him. The best he probably would have got was potentially P3 or P4, so it means he's got a lot to do in the race, but I like that strategy call from him. It was bold. But in the end, Max was dominant all throughout qualifying, managing to maintain that second gap throughout. It really seemed Hamilton-like to me, and by that I mean, you know, in changeable conditions, in those wet conditions, the cream tends to rise to the crop, and Hamilton has tended to be one of those ones that just manages to reign supreme in those conditions, and Max was very much doing that in qualifying. But it was a fantastic front row for Alonso. He manages to get P2. A great result for him. And then, in my opinion, I think it's disappointing for Carlos, only managing to get P3. On his final run in Q3, it looked like he was jostling with Max. He ended up with one sector quicker than Max getting the next sector quicker. But then Carlos admitted in his post-qualifying interview that he just gave it everything into that final chicane, and he was wrestling the car coming out of that final chicane and ended up dropping half a second. And you know, perhaps this is a symptom of him not quite having his first pole yet, not having his first win, and trying too hard almost. But you know, he potentially had P2 in the bag there, and that's now compromised him for the race, not being able to challenge Max off the line. And that means he's likely to get stuck behind Alonso, and can't immediately put that pressure on Max. And I just wonder whether Carlos not having his first win or first pole is kind of getting to him a little bit, and he's overdriving when really he needs to be maximising his results and giving himself a good shot at the race. I mean, that's where the points are won. But then also in qualifying, it's a great result for the Haas team. Kevin Magnussen in P5 and Mick with a fantastic P6. Best qualifying result for him. Best qualifying result ever for Haas as a team. So well done to them, really able to heat up their tyres and get the most out of their tyres. So great result for them, and that's got to be a big confidence boost for Mick when there's a bit of pressure piling on him now this season. At the start of the race, Max gets away really well. All of that pre-race talk from Alonso unfortunately amounting to nothing, and the front few cars get away as they lined up on the grid. But on lap 3, Sainz manages to get Alonso and then starts to chase after Max. Unfortunately on lap 8 for Perez, he goes out with a reliability issue, possibly hydraulics, possibly gearbox. That brings out the virtual safety car, and Verstappen pits and Hamilton pits, leaving Sainz, Alonso and Russell to stay out. We then get another virtual safety car on lap 20 caused by Mick with another mechanical issue for Haas and a Ferrari engine car. I'm not entirely sure what the issue was there. Disappointing for Mick because he was running a good race up until then in the points. But then Russell, Ocon, Zhou all pit under the virtual safety car, and then Sainz also pitting on the next lap. And then that sets up an interesting race. You've got a group of cars that pitted under the first virtual safety car, and then you've got a group of cars that pit under the second safety car. And now there's this talk of, can the people that pit under the first safety car, can they make it to the end, or is it going to be a two-stop? Quite high tyre deg after rain in qualifying, making the track a little bit more abrasive. So it sets up this interesting race where you've got these varying strategies. Yuki Tsunoda and then crashing on lap 49, just as he comes out of the pits on cold tyres. I heard that there was possibly a little bump on the exit of the pits, so possibly being caught out there, but he crashes into the wall and that brings out the safety car. That allows Sainz to pit after Verstappen's already pitted, so that puts Verstappen in P1, Sainz in P2, with Lewis in third and Russell in P4. And then this sets up a really interesting race at the end. Max under crazy amounts of pressure from Carlos for the last 16 laps, but managing to hold on for a fantastic win. To be honest, a dominant display all weekend from Max, holding off that pressure from Sainz. And in the end, it's a pretty good weekend for Carlos. He did did have good pace in the race. An interesting strategy from Ferrari, possibly seeming like they had the upper hand on Red Bull this weekend, but Max with the pace, and Carlos not quite able to make the move on him. He was so close towards the end, but a good weekend for both of those drivers. So it was a difficult race for Charles Leclerc. He did come home in P5, stuck behind the Alpines. I think it was Ocon for many laps. The Alpines with great top speed once again, like they did in Baku, making it really difficult for them to overtake. Ferrari was possibly not the best top speed out of the front runners, so that was difficult for Charles. And then when Charles finally pits off of his hard tyres, it's a poor stop for him and that puts him out behind a train of cars. Ferrari, their own worst enemies at the minute, but the safety car really helping out Charles, closing up the grid and allowing him to get fifth. So it's a good recovery from him. The Mercedes drivers had a good pace actually in the race, so getting on the podium wasn't really on the cards for Charles, but it's more drop points for Ferrari compared to Red Bull, or certainly in the Drivers' Championship. And then on to Mercedes, it's a P3 for Hamilton and a P4 for Russell. After a really difficult Friday, the Mercedes looking dreadful, absolutely dreadful. The wet qualifying session I think helped them, and then they had really good pace in the race. Hamilton at one point, one of the quickest drivers. I think it was after the second round of pit stops. Hamilton having a much better weekend, actually having the pace over George. George, of course, with that recovery from P8, coming home in P4. After the safety car came in, Lewis was dropping Russell. Actually, the top three cars dropping Russell. George possibly not being able to get his tyres up to temperature. But I think, it's a good weekend for Mercedes. They don't have the pace yet of the top two teams, but something that they have had over the top two teams is they've got the consistency and they've got the reliability. They're there to pick up the points when their rivals are faltering. Of course, Perez going out with a reliability issue, Charles Leclerc with an engine change. It means that Mercedes can pick up another podium and a really strong result for the team. There's a lot of positives there for Mercedes. If they can start to just eke out a few more tenths, get a bit more performance out of their car, it could still be a strong season for them yet. And I actually think second in the championship is a real possibility for them. And then onto the Alpines, it's a P6 for Ocon and a P7 for Alonso. To be honest, I think that's got to be a bit of a disappointing result for them. I think Ocon will be happy with it. He managed to get the jump on his teammate in the safety car period. But Alonso, after starting in second, dropping to seventh, it's a bit of a shame for him. Of course, he was dropping back early in the race. A lot of the other front-running teams having better pace than him. He seemed to be nursing an engine issue towards the end, so wasn't really able to attack Ocon, although the team did ask him to hold fire. Alonso on the radio to his team saying, well, I've had three tenths on my teammate all weekend, so I deserve the place over him, which I think is a classic Alonso piece of team radio. I think Alpine will be happy with the result. It's a really good points finish for them, but I think certainly on Alonso's side, he possibly would have been hoping for more, maybe a fifth place, maybe trying to fend off Leclerc. And then Alfa Romeo with a good double points finish. Zhou coming home in 9th, Bottas in 8th. Zhou having his best weekend in Formula 1. He qualified really well, making it into Q3 for the first time. And good points for Zhou. Really good weekend for him, so congrats to him. So, what did you think of the Canadian Grand Prix? I thought it was a really good weekend. I think I'd probably give the race an 8 out of 10. Some really tense laps at the end, a mixed up grid, and Charles coming through the pack. I thought it was a really good weekend. That's 6 wins on the trot now for Red Bull, and Max is 46 points clear at the top. That's almost 2 full race victories. Red Bull enjoying a fantastic run of form. And we're on to Silverstone next, and I'm honestly not sure who's going to be on top there. I think Red Bull have been quick on every track, Ferrari will be right there, and Mercedes also. The track's going to be a lot smoother, so Mercedes have a chance of running their car a bit lower, and they might be right there as well, so I think it's going to be a competitive race in Silverstone, and I honestly can't call this going to be quick. If you haven't already, why don't you check out my video on my top 10 F1 YouTube channels. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.